Sometimes the most extraordinary people walk among us disguised as ordinary teenagers. Sometimes the girl sitting alone in the cafeteria, wearing secondhand clothes and speaking with a different accent, carries secrets that could change everything you think you know about courage, sacrifice, and what it truly means to be strong. This is the story of Maya Chun, a 17-year-old who transferred to Lincoln High School in the middle of senior year. Her classmates saw a quiet, awkward girl who struggled with English and kept to herself. They saw someone easy to ignore, easy to mock, easy to dismiss. They had no idea they were looking at someone who had already lived through more in her 17 years than most people experience in a lifetime. They didn't know that behind her shy smile and hesitant words was a young woman who had risked everything to save her family, who had outsmarted dangerous people, and who carried the weight of incredible responsibility on her shoulders. The laughter would stop soon enough. The truth has a way of revealing itself, especially when it's as powerful as Maya's story. And when it did, Lincoln High School would never be the same again. Maya Chun stood at the entrance of Lincoln High School, her worn backpack slung over one shoulder and a crumpled piece of paper with her class schedule clutched in her hand. The February morning was cold, and she pulled her thin jacket tighter around herself as students pushed past her, laughing and chatting with their friends. Nobody seemed to notice the new girl standing uncertainly by the doors. She had been dreading this moment for weeks. Starting a new school was never easy, but doing it in the middle of senior year felt almost impossible. Maya had attended 3 different schools in the past 2 years, and she knew the routine by now. The stares, the whispers, the assumptions people made about her before they even knew her name. The hallways of Lincoln High were busy and loud. Students hurried between classes, lockers slammed shut, and teachers called out reminders about upcoming assignments. Maya checked her schedule again and started looking for room 204, where her first period English class was supposed to be. The numbers on the classroom doors seemed to jump around randomly, and she found herself walking in circles. "Excuse me," she said to a group of girls standing by their lockers. Her English still carried traces of her native Mandarin, making her words sound careful and measured. "Can you tell me where room 204 is?" The girls looked at her with barely concealed amusement. One of them, a blonde girl with perfectly styled hair and expensive clothes, looked Maya up and down before answering. "It's upstairs, 2nd floor. You're going the wrong way." "Thank you," Maya said quietly, but the girls had already turned back to their conversation, dismissing her completely. As Maya climbed the stairs, she heard one of them say, "Did you hear her accent? I wonder where she's from." The comment was followed by giggles, and Maya felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She was used to this reaction by now, but it never stopped hurting. Room 204 turned out to be at the far end of the hall. Maya slipped inside just as the bell rang, hoping to find a seat without drawing too much attention to herself. The teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, looked up from her desk and smiled warmly. "You must be Maya Chun," she said. "Class, we have a new student joining us today. Maya, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?" Maya felt every pair of eyes in the room turn toward her. She stood there awkwardly, trying to think of something to say that wouldn't invite more questions. "My name is Maya. I moved here from California. I'm happy to be here." A few students exchanged glances, and she heard someone whisper, "She talks funny." Maya's face grew hot, but she kept her expression neutral. She had learned long ago that showing weakness only made things worse. "Wonderful," Mrs. Rodriguez said kindly. "There's an empty seat next to Sarah. Sarah, could you raise your hand?" A girl with short brown hair and kind eyes waved from the middle of the classroom. Maya made her way over and sat down, grateful to be out of the spotlight. Sarah gave her a small smile, which Maya returned hesitantly. The rest of the class period was spent discussing a novel Maya had never heard of. She took notes carefully, trying to understand not just the words but the cultural references that seemed to fly over her head. When other students participated in the discussion, their comments were quick and confident, full of slang and expressions that Maya didn't recognize. After class, Sarah lingered while other students filed out. "Hey," she said to Maya, "that was brave of you to transfer in senior year. Are you settling in okay?" Maya was surprised by the genuine concern in Sarah's voice. Most students at her previous schools had either ignored her completely or made fun of her accent and shy demeanor. "It is difficult," she admitted, "but I will manage." "I bet it is. If you need help finding your other classes, I'd be happy to show you around. What do you have next?" Maya checked her schedule. "Chemistry with Mr. Peterson." "Oh, I have study hall, but I know where that is." "Come on, I'll walk you there." As they walked through the hallways, Sarah chatted easily about the school, the teachers, and which cafeteria food to avoid. Maya found herself relaxing slightly. Maybe the school wouldn't be as bad as the others. "So what brought your family to Lincoln?" Sarah asked as they approached the chemistry classroom. Maya's step faltered slightly. This was the question she had been dreading, the one that always led to more questions she couldn't answer. "My father found work here," she said simply, which was technically true, even if it left out most of the story. "That's cool. What kind of work does he do?" "He works in construction," Maya replied, another partial truth. Her father did work construction, but only because it was one of the few jobs he could get without proper documentation. Before they had fled China, he had been an engineer. Her mother had been a teacher. Now her mother worked nights cleaning office buildings, and they lived in a tiny apartment above a Chinese restaurant where the owner let them stay in exchange for her mother's help in the kitchen. "Here's your classroom," Sarah said, stopping outside a door marked with the periodic table of elements. "I'll see you at lunch, okay? Find me in the cafeteria." Maya nodded gratefully and watched Sarah disappear down the hall. It had been a long time since someone had been genuinely kind to her on her first day in new school. Chemistry class was challenging in a different way. The subject matter was difficult enough, but trying to follow Mr. Peterson's rapid-fire explanations while simultaneously translating scientific terms in her head was exhausting. She had been an excellent student in China, but here she felt constantly behind, constantly struggling to keep up. During the lab portion of class, Maya was partnered with a boy named Jake who seemed annoyed to be stuck with a new girl. He barely spoke to her, doing most of the experiment himself while she took notes and tried to stay out of his way. "Can you hand me the sodium chloride?" he asked impatiently at one point. Maya looked at the array of chemicals on their lab table, tried to remember which one was sodium chloride. In China, she had learned chemistry in Mandarin, and translating the terms took precious seconds she didn't have. "The salt," Jake said with obvious irritation. "Sodium chloride is salt." Maya quickly handed him the container, feeling stupid for not making the connection faster. Jake rolled his eyes and muttered something under his breath that she couldn't quite catch, but his tone made it clear it wasn't complimentary. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of new faces, confusing hallways, and teachers trying to be welcoming while Maya struggled to keep up. By the time lunch arrived, she was emotionally drained and fighting back tears of frustration. The cafeteria was enormous and loud, filled with hundreds of students clustered around tables with their established groups of friends. Maya bought a sandwich and looked around for Sarah, but the sea of faces was overwhelming. She finally spotted an empty table in the corner and made her way over, hoping to eat in peace. She had barely taken her first bite when she heard laughter from a nearby table. The blonde girl from that morning was sitting with a group of other perfectly groomed students, and they were looking in Maya's direction. "Look at her sitting all alone," one of them said, not bothering to lower her voice. "I heard she can barely speak English." "Where do you think she's from?" another girl asked. "She looks Chinese or something." "Probably some refugee family," the blonde girl, whose name Maya had learned was Madison, replied with a dismissive wave. "My dad says they're everywhere now, taking jobs from real Americans." Maya's appetite disappeared completely. She stared down at her sandwich, trying to make herself invisible while the cruel comments continued. This was worse than her previous schools, where the students had at least tried to be subtle about their prejudice. "Hey, Maya." Sarah's voice cut through the cafeteria noise as she approached with her lunch tray. "Sorry I'm late. Mind if I sit?" Maya looked up gratefully. "Please," she said, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. Sarah sat down and immediately noticed Maya's expression. You okay? You look upset. Maya glanced over at Madison's table, where the group was still occasionally looking in their direction and whispering. Sarah followed her gaze, and her face darkened. Ignore them, Sarah said firmly. Madison Winters thinks she rules this school because her dad owns half the businesses in town. She's not worth your time. It is okay, Maya said quietly. I'm used to it. Well, you shouldn't have to be, Sarah replied with surprising intensity. Look, I know it's hard being new, especially when people are jerks about it. But not everyone here is like that, I promise. As if to prove her point, a boy with dark hair and a friendly smile approached their table. Hey, Sarah, he said, then looked at Maya. You must be the new girl everyone's talking about. I am indeed. Maya, she replied, shaking his offer hand. Welcome to Lincoln. Fair warning, though. The cafeteria pizza is basically cardboard with cheese on top. Stick with the sandwiches. Maya found herself smiling for the first time all day. Thank you for the advice. No problem. Hey, are you planning to join any clubs or sports? It's a good way to meet people. Maya shook her head. Between helping her mother with her cleaning job in the evenings and studying late into the night to keep up with her classes, she barely had time to sleep, let alone participate in extracurricular activities. That's cool, David said easily. If you change your mind, I run the photography club. We meet Thursdays after school, and you don't need any experience. Just thought I'd mention it. After David left to join his friends at another table, Sarah turned to Maya with a thoughtful expression. You know, he's right about the clubs. It really is a good way to make friends. I do not have much free time, Maya admitted. Do you work or something? Maya hesitated. She did work, helping her mother clean offices from 6 in the evening until midnight most nights. But explaining that would lead to questions about why her family needed the money so desperately, and that was a conversation she couldn't have. I help my family, she said instead. Sarah nodded understandingly. That's important. Family first, right? The rest of lunch passed more pleasantly, with Sarah telling funny stories about their teachers and giving Maya tips about navigating the school's social landscape. When the bell rang, Maya felt slightly more optimistic about her chances of surviving Lincoln High. Her afternoon classes were more of the same challenging mix of difficult material and cultural barriers. In history class, they were discussing American politics, and Maya found herself lost in a discussion about concepts she barely understood. The teacher, Mr. Franklin, tried to include her by asking if she had any perspectives from her home country, but Maya just shook her head and mumbled that she preferred to listen. The truth was, Maya had very strong opinions about politics and government, but they weren't the kind of opinions she could share in an American high school classroom. She had seen what happened when governments became corrupt, when speaking out could get you disappeared, when families had to flee in the middle of the night with nothing but the clothes on their backs. In math class, at least, the language barrier was less of an issue. Numbers were universal, and Maya found herself understanding the material better than most of her classmates. For the first time all day, she felt confident raising her hand to answer a question. Very good, Maya, Mrs. Kim said with approval. You clearly have a strong mathematical background. A few students turned to look at her with surprise, as if they hadn't expected the quiet foreign girl to know anything. Maya felt a small surge of pride, but also a familiar wariness. Standing out too much, even in a positive way, could be dangerous. She had learned that lesson the hard way. After school, Maya walked to the bus stop alone. The February afternoon was gray and cold, and she pulled her thin jacket tighter as she waited. She watched other students getting picked up by their parents or climbing into cars with friends, chattering excitedly about plans for the evening. Maya's evening would be spent helping her mother prepare dinner for the restaurant owners, then doing homework until it was time to go to the office building downtown. If she was lucky, she might get 5 hours of sleep before starting the whole routine over again. As the bus arrived, Maya caught sight of Madison and her friends climbing into a shiny SUV. Madison happened to look in her direction and said something to her friends that made them laugh. Maya couldn't hear what she said, but the cruel smirk on Madison's face made it clear it wasn't anything kind. On the bus ride home, Maya stared out the window at the passing neighborhoods. Each one seemed to get a little shabbier, a little more run down, until finally the bus reached her stop in the part of town where the American dream felt very far away. She walked the last 3 blocks to the restaurant, dodging puddles and trying not to think about how different her life had been just 2 years ago. Back then, she had lived in a comfortable apartment in Shanghai. She had attended an excellent school where she was one of the top students. She had friends, a normal teenage life, plans for university. Everything had changed the night her father came home with terror in his eyes and told them they had to leave immediately. There was no time for explanations, no time to pack properly, no time to say goodbye. They had fled to Hong Kong first, then spent months navigating the complex process of seeking asylum in the United States. Now Maya lived in a tiny apartment above Golden Dragon Restaurant, where the smell of cooking oil seeped through the floorboards, and the walls were so thin she could hear every conversation in the restaurant below. Her parents worked multiple jobs just to pay the rent, and Maya spent her evenings helping wherever she could. But they were safe. That was what mattered. They were alive, and they were together, and nobody was looking for them anymore. Maya reminded herself of this every time the loneliness and frustration threatened to overwhelm her. She climbed the narrow stairs to their apartment and found her mother preparing vegetables for the restaurant's dinner service. Mrs. Chen looked up with tired eyes that still managed to smile when she saw her daughter. "How was school?" she asked in Mandarin. "Fine," Maya replied in the same language, not wanting to worry her mother with the details of Madison's cruelty or her own struggles to fit in. "Did you make any friends?" Maya thought of Sarah's kindness and David's friendly welcome. "Maybe," she said. "There's a girl named Sarah who seems nice." Her mother's face brightened slightly. "That is good. You need friends your age." Maya helped her mother finish the vegetable prep, then started on her homework at the small kitchen table. The apartment was quiet except for the sounds drifting up from the restaurant below. As evening approached, Maya could hear the dinner rush beginning, and she knew it would soon be time to head to her mother's cleaning job. But for now, she tried to focus on her chemistry homework, translating the problems in her head and working through the complex formulas. Despite everything, despite the loneliness and the exhaustion and the constant feeling of being an outsider, Maya was determined to succeed. She had dreams of college, of a career in science, of a life where she could use her intelligence to make a difference. She had no idea that her past was about to catch up with her in ways she never could have imagined, or that the skills she had learned during those terrifying months in hiding would soon be needed again. For now, Maya Chun was just a lonely teenager trying to survive high school, completely unaware that she was about to become the most talked-about student Lincoln High had ever seen. 3 weeks into February, Maya had settled into a routine at Lincoln High that was bearable, if not comfortable. She had lunch with Sarah most days, and David from photography club would sometimes join them. Her grades were improving as she became more familiar with the way American schools worked, and most teachers had stopped treating her like she might break if they spoke too loudly. But Madison Winters and her group of friends seemed determined to make Maya's life miserable. They had graduated from whispered comments to more direct harassment, accidentally bumping into her in the hallways and making loud comments about foreign students who couldn't even speak proper English. Maya had learned to keep her head down and ignore them, just as she had learned to ignore the stares and whispers from other students who saw her as an outsider. She focused on her studies and tried to blend into the background, hoping that eventually they would lose interest and find someone else to torment. Everything changed on a cold Thursday afternoon in early March. Maya was walking to her locker after chemistry class when she noticed a commotion near the main entrance. A group of students had gathered around someone, and she could hear raised voices echoing off the walls. At first, she assumed it was just another high school drama that had nothing to do with her. But as she got closer, Maya realized the crowd was surrounding a small man in a janitor's uniform who was speaking rapidly in what sounded like broken English. The man looked panicked, gesturing wildly with his hands while students stared at him with confusion and growing annoyance. "What's he saying?" she heard someone ask. "I can't understand him," another voice replied. "Someone should get a teacher." Maya pushed through the crowd and saw that the man was clearly in distress. He was middle-aged with graying hair, and his maintenance uniform was disheveled as if he had been running. His eyes darted around the group of teenagers surrounding him, desperately searching for someone who could understand what he was trying to communicate. "Por favor," he was saying, mixing Spanish with heavily accented English. "Mi nina, my daughter, she's ayuda, help please." The students around him were growing impatient. Some were pulling out their phones to record the scene, treating it like entertainment rather than recognizing that this man was clearly terrified about something. "Dude, just speak English," one boy said loudly, which made several other students laugh. "Maybe he's illegal." Madison's voice cut through the noise. She had appeared at the edge of the crowd with her usual group of followers. "Probably doesn't even belong here." Maya felt her stomach clench with familiar anger and shame. She recognized the look in the man's eyes, the desperation of someone who couldn't make others understand that something terrible was happening. She had seen that same look in her own parents' faces during their first months in America. Without thinking about the consequences, Maya stepped forward. "¿Qué pasa?" she asked the man in Spanish, surprising everyone around her, including herself. She hadn't planned to reveal that she spoke multiple languages. The man's face flooded with relief. "Habla español. Gracias, gracias. Mi hija, my daughter Sophia, she is hurt. In the basement. I try to get help, but nobody understand." Maya's mind raced as she processed what he was telling her. The man was saying his daughter was injured somewhere in the basement of the school and needed immediate help. "Donde in El Satano?" she asked, switching fluidly between Spanish and English as her brain worked to translate. "Where in the basement exactly?" "The storage room by the boiler. She fell. Her leg, I think, is broken. She cries so much, but I know can lift her alone." Maya turned to the crowd of students who were staring at her in shock. Sarah had appeared at her side, eyes wide with amazement. "His daughter is hurt in the basement," Maya announced loudly, her voice carrying clearly through the hallway. "She fell, and he thinks her leg is broken. She's trapped in the storage room by the boiler, and he can't lift her alone." The change in the crowd's demeanor was immediate. Students who had been laughing moments before suddenly looked concerned and ashamed of their reaction. Someone ran to get a teacher, while others started asking what they could do to help. "I'll show you where the basement is," David said, appearing with his camera bag slung over his shoulder. "I was down there last week taking photos for the yearbook." Maya nodded and turned back to the man. "Vamos," she said. "We're going to help your daughter." As they hurried through the hallways toward the basement stairs, Maya found herself surrounded by students who had never paid attention to her before. Sarah was at her side, asking rapid questions. "How many languages do you speak?" Sarah asked breathlessly as they descended the stairs. "Spanish, English, Mandarin, and some French," Maya replied without thinking, then realized she had just revealed more about herself than she had intended. "That's incredible," David said from behind them. "Where did you learn all of that?" Maya didn't answer, focused instead on following the janitor, whose name she had learned was Carlos. They could hear crying coming from somewhere ahead, a young voice calling out in Spanish for her father. "Sophia," Carlos called out. "Papá está aquí. I bring help." They found the storage room tucked away behind the school's massive boiler system. The door was propped open, and inside they could see a girl who looked to be about 10 years old sitting on the floor, her leg bent at an unnatural angle. She was crying and trying to comfort herself in Spanish. Maya immediately knelt down beside the girl while the other students stood uncertainly in the doorway. "Hola, Sophia," she said gently. "Me llamo Maya. I'm here to help you." Sophia looked up at Maya with tear-filled eyes. "Eres doctora?" she asked hopefully. "No, I'm not a doctor, but we're going to get you to one," Maya replied in Spanish, then switched to English for the benefit of the other students. "She's asking if I'm a doctor. Her leg is definitely broken. Maya had learned basic first aid during the months her family had spent in refugee camps, where medical help wasn't always available. She knew enough to recognize that Sophia needed professional medical attention immediately, but she also knew how to keep the girl calm and stable until help arrived. "Sophia, I need you to stay very still, okay?" Maya said in Spanish. "Don't try to move your leg. Your papa is here, and we're going to take care of you." She looked up at the other students. "Someone needs to call an ambulance. She can't be moved until paramedics get here." David was already on his phone. "I'm calling 911, he said. Meanwhile, Maya continued talking to Sophia in Spanish, keeping the girl distracted and calm. She asked about Sophia's school, her favorite subjects, her friends, anything to keep the child's mind off the pain and fear. Carlos knelt on the other side of his daughter, holding her hand and speaking to her in rapid Spanish. Maya could see the relief in his eyes at having someone who could communicate with both him and the other students. "He wants to know how this happened." Maya translated as Carlos explained the situation. "Sophia comes here after school sometimes when he's finishing his work. She was playing and fell off some boxes that were stacked too high. He tried to move her, but realized her leg might be badly hurt, and he needed help." More students had arrived, including some teachers who had heard about the emergency. Mrs. Rodriguez, Maya's English teacher, took charge of the situation, coordinating with the arriving paramedics and making sure the basement area was clear for the emergency responders. Throughout the entire incident, Maya stayed by Sophia's side, translating between the paramedics and the family, explaining procedures and keeping everyone calm. She watched as the paramedics carefully immobilized Sophia's leg and prepared her for transport to the hospital. "Maya," Carlos said as the paramedics were loading his daughter onto a stretcher. "Gracias, mi ángel." "Thank you so much." "De nada," Maya replied. "I hope Sophia feels better soon." As the ambulance pulled away, Maya found herself standing in the school parking lot surrounded by what felt like half the student body. Word had spread quickly about the emergency and Maya's role in helping resolve it. "Maya, that was amazing," Sarah said, her voice full of admiration. "How did you stay so calm?" "I've seen emergencies before," Maya said simply, which was true, even if she couldn't explain the circumstances. David was looking at her with newfound respect. "Seriously, where did you learn to handle a crisis like that? And when did you learn to speak Spanish so well?" Maya felt dozens of pairs of eyes on her, all waiting for her answer. For weeks, she had been trying to blend in, to remain invisible, to avoid drawing attention to herself. Now she was the center of everyone's focus, and they were asking questions she couldn't answer without revealing truths about her past that were too dangerous to share. "I've moved around a lot," she said carefully. "You pick up languages when you live in different places." Madison Winters was standing at the edge of the crowd, and for once, she wasn't smirking. She looked genuinely curious, and maybe even a little impressed. "But where exactly have you lived?" she asked. "I mean, you speak Chinese, and Spanish, and French? That's not normal." Maya felt her heart rate increase. This was exactly the kind of attention she had been trying to avoid. In her previous schools, she had managed to keep her language abilities mostly hidden, speaking only English even when it would have been easier to communicate in her native Mandarin. "My family has moved around for my father's work," she said, sticking to the same vague explanation she had used before. But David wasn't satisfied with the evasion. "What kind of work requires that much travel? Is he in the military or something?" "Something like that," Maya said, then immediately regretted it. Lying about her father being in the military felt wrong, but she couldn't explain that he had actually been a dissident engineer who had fled China after exposing government corruption. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared at Maya's side, sensing the girl's discomfort with all the questions. "All right, everyone, the excitement is over. Maya handled herself beautifully today, but let's give her some space now." As the crowd reluctantly began to disperse, Maya felt both relief and anxiety. She had helped Sophia and her father, which felt good, but she had also revealed more about herself than was safe. In her family's experience, standing out too much, even for positive reasons, could attract the wrong kind of attention. Sarah walked with her back toward the school building. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "there's more to you than meets the eye, isn't there?" Maya glanced at her friend nervously. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you speak 4 languages, you handle emergency situations like a trained professional, and you've been to enough places to pick up all these different skills. That's not typical for someone our age." Maya didn't respond, and Sarah seemed to sense that pushing for more information would be unwelcome. "Well, whatever your story is," Sarah said finally, "I'm glad you were here today. You probably saved that little girl from being way more scared and hurt than she already was." As Maya gathered her books from her locker, she couldn't shake the feeling that today had changed something fundamental about her time at Lincoln High. For better or worse, she was no longer invisible. Students who had never noticed her before were now looking at her with curiosity and respect. But Maya had learned long ago that being noticed wasn't always a good thing. As she walked to catch her bus, she found herself looking over her shoulder, a habit from the days when her family had lived in constant fear of being discovered. The next morning, Maya arrived at school hoping that the previous day's excitement had died down and she could return to her quiet anonymity. But as soon as she walked through the front doors, she realized that wasn't going to happen. "Maya," a voice called out, and she turned to see several students she barely knew approaching her with excited expressions. "Is it true you speak Chinese?" one of them asked. "And Spanish and French," added another. "My mom said she heard about what happened yesterday. She thinks you're like some kind of genius or something." Maya felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention. All she wanted was to get to her first period class without any more fuss, but students kept stopping her in the hallways to ask questions or express admiration for what she had done. In English class, Mrs. Rodriguez made a point of praising Maya in front of everyone. Yesterday, Maya demonstrated not only her linguistic abilities, but also her maturity and compassion in helping a family in crisis. It's a reminder that we all have unique talents and experiences that can make a difference when we choose to use them to help others. Maya felt her cheeks burn as the other students turned to look at her. She appreciated Mrs. Rodriguez's kind words, but the attention made her deeply uncomfortable. At lunch, her usual quiet table with Sarah had somehow expanded to include David, several other students from her classes, and even a few seniors she had never spoken to before. "So Maya," said a girl named Jessica, "I heard you're really good at math too. Are you planning to go to college somewhere really competitive, like MIT or Stanford?" "I haven't thought that far ahead," Maya said honestly. The truth was that she thought about college constantly, but her family's immigration status made everything complicated. She couldn't apply for most financial aid programs, and even if she could get into a good school, paying for it would be nearly impossible. "Come on," said another student. "Someone with your abilities must have big plans. What do you want to study?" Maya hesitated. In China, she had dreamed of becoming a biomedical engineer, combining her love of science with her desire to help people. But those dreams felt impossibly distant now. "Maybe something in science," she said vaguely. The conversation continued around her, with students sharing their own college plans and asking increasingly personal questions about Maya's background and future goals. She answered as best she could while revealing as little as possible, but the effort was exhausting. After lunch, Maya found a quiet spot in the library where she could decompress and think. The attention was flattering in some ways, but it also made her nervous. Her family had spent 2 years carefully avoiding notice, blending in, staying under the radar. Being the center of attention went against every instinct they had developed for survival. But as she sat there, Maya also realized something else. For the first time since arriving in America, she felt like her real self had been glimpsed by others. The languages, the quick thinking in crisis situations, the academic ability she had been carefully hiding. These were all parts of who Maya really was. She had been so focused on becoming invisible that she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen and appreciated for her true capabilities. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. As Maya prepared to leave the library for her next class, she had no idea that her moment of visibility had reached far beyond the walls of Lincoln High School. Word of the multilingual student who had helped save the day was spreading through the community in ways that would soon bring consequences she never could have anticipated. The truth about Maya Chan was beginning to emerge, and once that process started, it would be impossible to stop. The weekend after the incident with Sophia brought Maya the first peaceful days she had experienced since starting at Lincoln High. Her family spent Saturday helping at Golden Dragon Restaurant, and Maya found comfort in the familiar routine of chopping vegetables and translating between her parents and the English-speaking customers. But on Monday morning, Maya's quiet existence was shattered in a way she never could have anticipated. She was walking to her locker when Principal Anderson appeared in the hallway, accompanied by a woman Maya had never seen before. The woman was well-dressed, carrying a briefcase, and had the kind of serious expression that made Maya's stomach drop with familiar anxiety. "Maya Chun," Principal Anderson called out. "Could we speak with you for a moment?" Maya's first instinct was to run. Her family had spent months living in fear of official-looking people who asked to speak with them. But she was in the middle of a crowded high school hallway, surrounded by students who were already staring with curiosity. Running would only make things worse. "Of course," Maya said, hoping her voice sounded calmer than she felt. They led her to Principal Anderson's office, where the woman introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Nguyen from the County Education Department. Maya's hands began to tremble slightly as she sat in the chair across from the principal's desk. "Maya," Dr. Nguyen said with a warm smile, "I've been hearing remarkable things about you. Your response to the emergency situation last week was quite impressive." Maya nodded cautiously, unsure where this conversation was heading. "I understand you speak multiple languages fluently," Dr. Nguyen continued. "Mandarin, Spanish, French, and English. Is that correct?" "Yes," Maya replied quietly. "That's extraordinary for someone your age. I'm also told you have exceptional mathematical abilities and have been performing well academically despite starting here mid-semester." Maya waited for the other shoe to drop, for the questions that would reveal her family's precarious situation and put them all in danger. "Maya," Principal Anderson interjected, "Dr. Nguyen is here because she wants to discuss some opportunities for you." "Academic opportunities." Dr. Nguyen opened her briefcase and pulled out several thick folders. "Maya, have you ever heard of the Governor's Academic Excellence Program?" Maya shook her head. "It's a state-funded program that identifies exceptionally gifted students from underrepresented communities and provides them with enhanced educational resources. Full scholarships to summer programs at prestigious universities, mentorship opportunities, and guaranteed admission pathways to top colleges." Maya felt her heart racing. This sounded too good to be true, which in her experience meant it probably was. The program specifically seeks out students who have overcome significant challenges, Dr. Nguyen continued. Students who have demonstrated resilience, linguistic abilities, and academic excellence despite difficult circumstances. Maya's mouth went dry. "What kind of difficult circumstances?" "Well, that's what we'd like to discuss with you. Your application would be much stronger if we understood your background better. Your family's immigration story, the challenges you've faced adapting to American schools, the experiences that shaped your remarkable abilities." Maya felt trapped. Everything Dr. Nguyen was describing sounded like a dream come true, but accepting it would mean revealing exactly the kind of information her family had spent years hiding. "I would need to discuss this with my parents," Maya said carefully. "Of course," Dr. Nguyen replied. "But, Maya, I want you to understand what an incredible opportunity this is. Students in this program receive full scholarships to universities like Stanford, MIT, Harvard. They get internships at major tech companies, research opportunities with leading scientists. This could change your entire future." After Dr. Nguyen left, Maya sat in Principal Anderson's office trying to process what had just happened. "Maya," the principal said gently, "I know this might feel overwhelming, but Dr. Nguyen is right. This is a life-changing opportunity. Your teachers have been raving about your potential. What did they tell her about me? Maya asked nervously. Just that you're clearly capable of much more than your current academic placement suggests. Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned that your writing shows sophisticated thinking that seems beyond your years. Mr. Peterson said your mathematical abilities are at a college level. And, of course, everyone heard about how you handled the emergency situation. Maya nodded, but inside she felt conflicted. Her teachers meant well, but their praise had attracted exactly the kind of official attention her family had always feared. Think about it over the weekend, Principal Anderson said. But, Maya, opportunities like this don't come along often, especially for students from immigrant families. The rest of the school day passed in a blur. Maya couldn't concentrate on any of her classes, her mind constantly cycling between excitement about the possibilities Dr. Nguyen had described and terror about what revealing her family's story might mean. At lunch, she told Sarah about the meeting, carefully omitting some of the more concerning details. Maya, that's amazing, Sarah exclaimed. A full scholarship program? You have to apply. It's complicated, Maya said. What's complicated about it? This is exactly the kind of thing you deserve. You're probably the smartest person in this entire school. David, who had joined them at their table, overheard the conversation. What scholarship program? As Sarah explained what she knew about Maya's meeting with Dr. Nguyen, Maya noticed that their conversation was attracting attention from nearby tables. Madison Winters was openly eavesdropping, and Maya saw her whisper something to her friends that made them all look in Maya's direction. After school, Maya rode the bus home with her mind churning. She needed to talk to her parents, but she dreaded the conversation. Any discussion of their background inevitably brought up painful memories of why they had fled China and the constant fear that had defined their lives ever since. At home, Maya found her parents preparing for the evening shift at their respective jobs. Her father looked exhausted from his construction work, and her mother was getting ready to head to the office building for another night of cleaning. Mama, Baba, Maya said in Mandarin, I need to tell you about something that happened at school today. She explained the meeting with Dr. Nguyen, translating the details about the scholarship program and the opportunities it could provide. Her parents listened with expressions that shifted from concern to amazement to worry. It sounds too good to be true, her father said finally. In our experience, when officials start asking questions about our background, it doesn't end well. But, Baba, this is different, Maya said. This is about education, about my future. If I could get into a good university with a full scholarship. Her mother looked thoughtful. What exactly would you have to tell them? They want to know about our immigration story, about the challenges we've faced. They think it will make my application stronger. Maya's parents exchanged a long look, the kind of wordless communication that couples develop after years of facing difficulties together. Maya, her father said slowly, there are things about our situation that you don't fully understand. Reasons we had to leave China that go beyond what we've told you. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. She had always known there was more to the story, but her parents had been very careful about how much they revealed, even to her. What do you mean? She asked. Her mother sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Sit down, sweetheart. It's time you knew the truth. What her parents told her over the next hour changed everything Maya thought she knew about her family's past. Her father hadn't just been an engineer in China. He had been a civil engineer working on major government infrastructure projects who had discovered widespread corruption in the bidding process for a massive dam project. When he tried to report it through official channels, he was told to keep quiet and forget what he had seen. But I couldn't forget, her father said. The corruption meant they were using substandard materials, cutting safety corners. If that dam failed, thousands of people could die. So Maya's father had done what he thought was right. He had secretly gathered evidence and provided it to international journalists who exposed the corruption in a series of articles that embarrassed the Chinese government. Within days, officials came to our home, her mother continued. They said your father would be arrested for treason, for undermining state security. We had maybe 6 hours before they came back. Maya stared at her parents in shock. So we're not just immigrants. We're political refugees. Yes, her father said. And the people we fled from have long memories. Even here in America, we have to be careful about drawing too much attention to ourselves. Maya felt the weight of this revelation settling over her like a heavy blanket. Everything made sense now. The constant moving, the careful way her parents spoke about their past, their fear of officials and paperwork. But the scholarship program, Maya said slowly, they want to know all of this. And once our story becomes part of official records, her father said, there's no controlling who might have access to that information. Maya's mother reached across the table and took her hand. Sweetheart, we've sacrificed everything to keep you safe and give you opportunities. The last thing we want is to hold you back from achieving your dreams. But, her father added, we also can't risk putting our family in danger. Not even for the best scholarship in the world. That night, Maya lay awake staring at the ceiling of her small bedroom, listening to the sounds of the restaurant below and the city beyond. For the first time, she truly understood the impossible position her family was in. They had risked everything to escape persecution in China, but the very circumstances that had shaped Maya into the exceptional student she was also made it dangerous for her to shine too brightly. The next morning at school, Maya found herself looking at her classmates differently. They could apply for scholarships without worrying about what officials might discover. They could share their family stories without fearing the consequences. They took for granted freedoms that Maya's family couldn't risk exercising. In first period English, Mrs. Rodriguez pulled Maya aside after class. Maya, I hope you're seriously considering Dr. Nguyen's offer, she said. I've been teaching for 15 years, and I've rarely seen a student with your combination of intelligence, maturity, and resilience. I'm thinking about it, Maya said. Is there anything holding you back? Any concerns you'd like to discuss? Maya looked into her teacher's kind eyes and wished she could explain the real situation. Mrs. Rodriguez meant well, but she couldn't understand what it was like to live with the constant fear that your past might catch up with you. It's just a big decision, Maya said finally. At lunch, the conversation inevitably returned to the scholarship opportunity. Word had spread through the school that Maya was being considered for some kind of prestigious academic program, and students kept approaching her with questions and congratulations. I don't understand why you're not more excited, Sarah said as they sat in their usual spot in the cafeteria. This is like winning the lottery, but for smart people. There might be complications with my family situation, Maya said carefully. What kind of complications? David asked. Before Maya could answer, Madison Winters appeared at their table with her usual group of followers. But instead of the mocking expression Maya had come to expect, Madison looked genuinely curious. Maya, Madison said, I've been hearing about this scholarship thing. Is it true you might get into Harvard? Maya felt uncomfortable being the center of Madison's attention, even positive attention. Nothing is decided yet. But, seriously, Madison continued, where exactly are you from? I mean, your family must have an interesting story if you speak all those languages and the state education people are interested in you. Maya felt trapped. Madison's question sounded innocent enough, but she could sense the calculating look in the other girl's eyes. Madison was the kind of person who collected information about others and used it to her advantage. We've lived in several places, Maya said vaguely. But where were you born? China. Yes. And you came here when? Recently. Maya felt increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the questioning. A few years ago. Madison nodded thoughtfully. My dad knows people in immigration law. He says it's really hard for Chinese families to get visas unless they have special circumstances, like political asylum or something. Maya felt her blood turn cold. Madison's casual comment had hit uncomfortably close to the truth. I wouldn't know about that, Maya said, standing up abruptly. I have to go to class. As she walked away, Maya could hear Madison's voice behind her, speculating with her friends about what special circumstances might have brought Maya's family to America. For the rest of the day, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking on increasingly thin ice. The attention from a scholarship program was bringing exactly the kind of scrutiny her family had always feared, and students like Madison were asking questions that came dangerously close to truths that needed to stay hidden. That evening, Maya called Dr. Nguyen's office and left a message saying she needed more time to consider the scholarship opportunity. She didn't mention that she was beginning to suspect that accepting it might put her entire family at risk. But Maya had no idea that the forces set in motion by her moment of visibility were already beyond her control. The story of the remarkable multilingual student at Lincoln High was spreading through the community in ways that would soon make anonymity impossible, regardless of what she decided about the scholarship. And Madison Winters, whose father did indeed have connections in immigration law, had become very curious about Maya Chen's family story. Curious enough to start asking questions of her own. Madison Winters had always been someone who needed to be at the center of everything. As the daughter of Richard Winters, one of Lincoln's most successful attorneys, she had grown up believing that information was power and that knowing other people's secrets gave her control over her social environment. Maya Chen's evasiveness about her family background had piqued Madison's curiosity in a way that wouldn't let go. Over the weekend, she had done what she always did when she wanted to know something. She asked her father to help her investigate. Richard Winters specialized in corporate law, but his firm had handled enough immigration cases that he had connections throughout the legal community. When Madison asked him about the special circumstances that might bring a Chinese family to America as refugees, he had been happy to explain the various possibilities. Political asylum seekers, he had told her over dinner on Saturday night. People who fled persecution for their political beliefs, religious practices, or because they exposed government corruption. It's actually quite difficult to prove, which is why so many applications are denied. Madison had pressed for more details, claiming it was for a school project about immigration. Her father, pleased by his daughter's apparent interest in his work, had explained how asylum cases worked, what kind of documentation was required, and how families often had to live in fear even after reaching safety. The thing about political refugees, he had said, is that they often have to keep their stories quiet, even after they're granted asylum. The governments they fled from have long reaches, and there can be consequences for speaking out publicly. On Monday morning, Madison had a plan. If Maya Chen's family were political refugees, there would be records somewhere. And if Madison could find those records, she would have the kind of information that could be very useful. She started with the most obvious approach, internet searches. During her study hall period, Madison used the school's computer lab to look up anything she could find about Chinese political refugees in their area. She searched for news articles, legal documents, anything that might mention a family with the surname Chun. What she found exceeded her expectations. Buried in a local newspaper archive from 18 months earlier was a small article about a Chinese engineer who had been granted political asylum after exposing government corruption. The article didn't name the man, referring to him only as a civil engineer who provided evidence of safety violations in major infrastructure projects. But the article did mention that the engineer had a wife and a teenage daughter, and that they had been living in temporary housing while their asylum application was processed. Madison felt a thrill of discovery. This had to be Maya's family. The timeline matched, the circumstances fit, and it explained everything about Maya's mysterious background and obvious intelligence. But Madison wanted more concrete proof. During lunch, she approached the topic carefully with her friends. "You know," she said as they sat at their usual table, "I've been thinking about Maya Chun. Don't you think it's weird how secretive she is about her family?" Her friend Jessica shrugged. "Maybe they're just private people. But she speaks 4 languages and knows advanced math and can handle emergency situations like a professional," Madison continued. "Normal teenagers don't have those kinds of skills." "What are you getting at?" asked another friend, Brittany. "I think there's more to her story than she's letting on. I think her family might be refugees or something." Madison watched her friends' faces carefully, gauging their reactions. She could see the spark of interest in their eyes, the same fascination with secrets and drama that made high school social dynamics so intense. "How can we find out?" Jessica asked. Madison smiled. This was exactly the reaction she had been hoping for. Leave that to me. After school, Madison didn't go straight home. Instead, she drove to her father's law office, a sleek building in the professional district of town. She often came here to do homework when she wanted to avoid distractions, so the receptionist waved her through to her father's office without question. Richard Winters was reviewing contracts when his daughter knocked on his door. Madison, what brings you here today? I wanted to ask you more about those political asylum cases we discussed, Madison said, settling into one of the leather chairs across from his desk. For my project, of course. What specifically did you want to know? Well, I was wondering how we could find out if someone in our community had been granted asylum. Like, are those records public? Her father frowned slightly. Some information is public, but much of it is sealed to protect the refugees' safety. Why are you asking? Madison had prepared for this question. There's a girl at school whose family I think might be refugees, and I wanted to understand what they might have gone through. You know, to be more empathetic. Richard Winters smiled at his daughter's apparent compassion. That's very thoughtful of you. What makes you think they might be refugees? She speaks multiple languages. She's really smart, but seems scared of attention, and she's very secretive about where her family came from. Madison's father nodded thoughtfully. Those could certainly be indicators. Many refugee families do try to keep low profiles, especially political asylum seekers. Is there any way to find out for sure? I mean, if I wanted to help them or understand their situation better. Richard Winters hesitated. He knew his daughter well enough to recognize when she was pursuing information for reasons that weren't entirely altruistic. Madison, I hope you understand that if this family are refugees, their privacy is extremely important. Exposing their story without their consent could actually put them in danger. Of course, Dad. I would never do anything to hurt them. But even as she said the words, Madison was already planning her next move. Her father might be cautious about respecting privacy, but Madison had grown up in a world where information was currency, and she had just discovered that Maya Chun might be sitting on a very valuable story. The next morning, Madison arrived at school with a new sense of purpose. She began paying closer attention to Maya's behavior, looking for clues that might confirm her suspicions. During first period, she noticed how Maya tensed up whenever teachers asked about her background. In the hallway between classes, she observed how Maya seemed to constantly scan her surroundings, as if always looking for potential threats. At lunch, Madison decided to test her theory more directly. She approached Maya's table with what she hoped looked like casual interest. "Hey, Maya," she said, "I was thinking about what you said yesterday about your family living in different places. That must have been really difficult, moving around so much." Maya looked up warily. "It was fine." "I bet it wasn't fine, though," Madison pressed gently. "Moving is hard enough when it's just for a job. It must be especially hard when families have to leave their home country for other reasons." Maya's expression became guarded. "What do you mean?" "Oh, you know, sometimes families have to leave because of political situations or safety concerns. My dad's law firm has handled cases like that." Sarah, who had been listening to the conversation, looked confused. "What are you talking about, Madison?" But Maya had gone very still, her face pale. Madison could see that her guess had hit the mark. "I just meant that I understand how difficult it must be to start over in a new country," Madison said, trying to sound sympathetic. "Especially when you can't really talk about why you had to leave." Maya stood up abruptly. "I have to go," she said, gathering her lunch and backpack. "Maya, wait," Sarah called, but Maya was already walking quickly toward the exit. Madison watched her go with satisfaction. Maya's reaction had confirmed everything she suspected. Now, she just needed to find the proof. That afternoon, Madison made another visit to her father's office, this time armed with more specific information. She had noticed the name Golden Dragon Restaurant on a food delivery receipt in the school office, and she remembered seeing Maya walking in that direction after school. "Dad," she said, "I've been thinking more about that refugee family I mentioned. I think I might know where they live." "Madison, I told you yesterday that their privacy is important." I know. But I was thinking, what if we could help them? Your firm does pro bono work sometimes, right? Maybe they need legal assistance or something." Richard Winters looked at his daughter suspiciously. "What exactly are you planning?" "Nothing bad," Madison insisted. "I just want to understand their situation. Maybe I could interview them for my project or help them connect with resources." Madison, if this family are political refugees, the last thing they want is a teenager asking them questions about their background. But Madison could see that her father was intrigued despite his caution. She knew he took pride in his legal knowledge and his ability to help people navigate complex immigration issues. "What if you just check to see if they might need help?" Madison suggested. "You could approach them professionally, offer your services. If they don't need anything, no harm done." Richard Winters sighed. "I suppose I could make some discreet inquiries. But, Madison, you need to promise me that you won't approach this family directly. If they are refugees, interfering with their privacy could have serious consequences." "I promise," Madison said, crossing her fingers behind her back. By the end of the week, Richard Winters had gathered enough information to confirm what Madison had suspected. The Chen family were indeed political asylum seekers who had fled China after Maya's father exposed government corruption. Their case had been closely watched by several human rights organizations, and their story was exactly the kind of dramatic narrative that made compelling news. "Madison," he told her over dinner on Friday night, "I was right to be cautious about this family. Their situation is more complex and dangerous than I initially thought." Madison leaned forward eagerly. "What did you find out?" The father, Chen Wei, was a civil engineer who uncovered massive corruption in a dam construction project. When he tried to report it, he was threatened with arrest for treason. The family barely escaped China with their lives. "Wow," Madison breathed. "That's incredible. Maya must have been through so much." "Which is exactly why their privacy needs to be protected," her father emphasized. "The Chinese government has been known to retaliate against dissidents even after they've fled the country. This family's safety depends on maintaining a low profile." But Madison was no longer listening to her father's warnings about discretion. She was thinking about how Maya had been hiding one of the most dramatic stories she had ever heard. She was thinking about how this information could change the entire social dynamic at school, and how being the person who revealed it would put her at the center of the biggest story Lincoln High had seen in years. Most of all, she was thinking about how Maya had been chosen for that prestigious scholarship program, a program that would give her opportunities Madison felt she deserved more. By Saturday morning, Madison had made her decision. She was going to tell Maya's story, not out of malice, but because she believed the truth should be known. And if revealing the truth happened to knock Maya down a few pegs in the process, well, that was just an unfortunate side effect. Madison spent the weekend crafting her approach. She would start by telling just a few close friends, swearing them to secrecy, of course. But secrets in high school had a way of spreading, especially secrets as dramatic as Maya's. What Madison didn't realize was that she was about to set in motion events that would have consequences far beyond anything she had imagined. Maya Chen's story was indeed powerful, but it was also dangerous. And there were people beyond the walls of Lincoln High School who had very good reasons for wanting the Chun family to remain invisible. By Monday morning, Maya would learn that her carefully constructed anonymity was about to be shattered, and that the life she and her family had built was about to be tested in ways that would make their escape from China seem simple by comparison. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Maya's mood as she walked through the halls of Lincoln High. Over the weekend, she had made the difficult decision to decline the scholarship opportunity. The risk to her family's safety was simply too great, no matter how much the program could have changed her future. She had planned to tell Sarah about her decision at lunch, but as soon as she entered her first period English class, Maya could sense that something was different. Students were whispering more than usual, and she caught several of them glancing in her direction with expressions that seemed to mix curiosity with something that looked almost like pity. Mrs. Rodriguez seemed unusually distracted during the lesson, frequently checking her phone and looking toward the door as if expecting someone. When the bell rang, she asked Maya to stay behind. "Maya," she said gently, "I think you should know that there have been some rumors circulating about your family this morning." Maya felt her stomach drop. "What kind of rumors?" "Someone seems to have shared information about your family's background as political refugees. I don't know how accurate the information is, but word is spreading quickly. Maya's hands began to shake. This was exactly what her parents had feared, exactly the kind of exposure that could put them all in danger. Who? Maya asked quietly. Who shared the information? Mrs. Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. I'm not certain, but I believe it started with Madison Winters and her group of friends. Maya closed her eyes, trying to process this information. Madison had somehow discovered the truth about her family's past and had decided to spread it around the school like gossip. Maya, is there anything I could do to help? Mrs. Rodriguez asked. If your family needs support or if there are safety concerns, there are resources available. I need to call my parents, Maya said. Of course, you can use the phone in the main office. As Maya walked through the hallways toward the office, she became acutely aware of how students' behavior toward her had changed. Some looked at her with newfound respect and sympathy, others with curiosity, and a few with the kind of uncomfortable stares that made her feel like an exhibit in a museum. By the time she reached the main office, Maya's phone was buzzing with messages from Sarah, David, and several other students asking if the rumors were true and if she was okay. But there was also a message from an unknown number that made her blood run cold. The message was simple. We know who you are now, Maya-chun. Your father thought he could hide, but truth always comes to light. Tell him his old friends haven't forgotten. Maya stared at the message, her mind racing. This wasn't just high school drama anymore. Someone with connections to China had seen the story spreading about her family and had decided to make contact. She called her father immediately, speaking to him in rapid Mandarin and trying to keep her voice low. Baba, someone at school found out about our past and told everyone. And I just received a threatening message. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Pack your things, Maya. Come home immediately. We may need to leave again. Leave? But where would we go? I don't know yet. But if people know our story, if it's spreading online or in the news, it's not safe for us to stay here. Maya felt her world collapsing. Just when she had started to feel settled, just when she had made friends and found a place where she could succeed academically, it was all being torn away. As she gathered her books from her locker, Sarah appeared at her side, looking concerned and confused. Maya, what's going on? Everyone's saying your family escaped from China because your dad exposed government corruption. Is that true? Maya nodded, too emotionally drained to maintain the pretense any longer. That's incredible, Sarah said. And terrible. I'm so sorry you've had to keep that secret. Sarah, I may have to leave, Maya said quietly. My family thinks it's not safe for us here anymore now that people know. Leave? But you just got here. And what about the scholarship program? I already decided I couldn't accept it. It would have required sharing our story officially, which would have made us too visible. Sarah looked stricken. This is all because Madison couldn't keep her mouth shut, isn't it? Maya didn't answer, but her expression confirmed Sarah's suspicion. I'm going to find her, Sarah said angrily. She needs to understand what she's done. Sarah, don't. It won't help anything now. But Sarah was already walking away, her face set with determination. Meanwhile, Madison Winters was discovering that being at the center of a major story wasn't as satisfying as she had anticipated. What had started as sharing interesting information with a few friends had snowballed into something much larger and more serious. By lunchtime, the story of Maya's family had spread beyond Lincoln High. Someone had posted about it on social media, and from there it had been picked up by local news outlets looking for human interest stories. The narrative of the brave Chinese engineer who had risked everything to expose corruption, and his brilliant daughter who was now excelling in American schools despite tremendous challenges, was exactly the kind of story that captured public attention. But with that attention came scrutiny that Maya's family had never wanted. Journalists started calling the school, asking for interviews. Immigration advocacy groups reached out, wanting to highlight the family's story as an example of why political asylum laws were important. And somewhere in China, people who had very good reasons for wanting Chen Wei to remain silent learned that their former target was alive, well, and living in a small American town. When Sarah finally found Madison in the cafeteria, the confrontation was swift and intense. "Madison," Sarah said, her voice carrying across the noisy cafeteria, "I need to talk to you." Madison looked up from her lunch, surrounded as always by her group of friends. "What about?" "About Maya. About how you destroyed her family's safety because you couldn't resist sharing gossip." The cafeteria had grown quieter as students sensed drama unfolding. Madison felt dozens of pairs of eyes on her, and her defensive instincts kicked in. "I didn't do anything wrong," Madison said. "I just shared information that was already public record." "Public record?" Sarah's voice was rising. "Her family are political refugees. They're in hiding for their own safety, and you just broadcast their location and identity to the entire world." "They're not in hiding," Madison protested. "They're living normal lives. Maya goes to school here. She was applying for scholarships. Because they thought they were safe here. Because they thought they could trust that their neighbors wouldn't expose them to danger for the sake of entertainment." Madison's friends were looking uncomfortable now, sensing that this was more serious than typical high school drama. David had appeared next to Sarah, and his usually friendly expression was cold as he looked at Madison. "Do you have any idea what you might have done to them?" David asked quietly. "I was just trying to help people understand Maya better," Madison said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Help people understand?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "Or help yourself become the center of attention by sharing someone else's trauma?" By this point, Principal Anderson had arrived, having been alerted by teachers who could see the situation escalating. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking between Sarah and Madison. "Madison shared confidential information about Maya's family," Sarah said. "Information that could put them in real danger." Principal Anderson's expression grew grave. He had spent the morning fielding calls from reporters and immigration attorneys, and he was beginning to understand the full scope of what had been set in motion. "Madison, I need to speak with you privately," he said. "Everyone else, please return to your normal activities." In his office, Principal Anderson explained to Madison the potential consequences of what she had done. Political refugees often faced ongoing threats from the governments they had fled. By making the Chun family story public, she might have exposed them to retaliation that could be very serious indeed. "I didn't know," Madison said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I thought it was just an interesting story. I didn't realize they could be in actual danger." "Madison, I believe you didn't intend to cause harm," Principal Anderson said. "But intentions don't always determine outcomes. Right now, Maya's family is considering leaving town because they no longer feel safe here." Madison felt sick to her stomach. She had been so focused on the drama and attention that Maya's story could provide that she had never considered the human cost of revealing it. "Is there anything I can do?" she asked. "I honestly don't know," Principal Anderson replied. "The damage may already be done." While Madison was learning about the consequences of her actions, Maya was at home helping her parents pack their most essential belongings. Her father had received 3 more threatening messages, and her mother had been approached by a stranger outside the restaurant who had asked pointed questions about their family. "Where will we go?" Maya asked as she folded clothes into the same small suitcase she had used when they fled China. "There's a community in Oregon," her mother said. "People who help families like ours start over when their safety is compromised. We have contacts there." "But what about school? What about my friends?" Maya's parents exchanged a look. They had sacrificed so much to give their daughter a chance at a normal life, and now that was being taken away again. "Maya," her father said gently, "we've been thinking about this all day. Maybe you don't have to come with us." Maya stared at her parents in shock. "What do you mean?" "Sarah's mother called," her mother explained. "She offered to let you stay with their family until the school year ends. You could finish your senior year, graduate with your class. But what about our families staying together?" "Sometimes," her father said sadly, "keeping the family safe means making difficult choices." Maya felt tears streaming down her face. After everything they had been through together, after all the moves and changes and struggles, the idea of being separated from her parents was almost unbearable. But as she looked around their small apartment, at the life they had built here that was now being dismantled again, Maya realized something important. The story that Madison had exposed wasn't just about her family's past. It was about their courage, their resilience, and their refusal to stay silent in the face of injustice. No, Maya said firmly. If we leave together. But maybe we don't have to run this time. Her parents looked at her questioningly. The story is already out there, Maya continued. People know who we are and what we've been through. But maybe that's not entirely bad. Maybe being visible means we're not alone anymore. That evening, as Maya's family discussed their options, Maya's phone rang. It was Dr. Nguyen from the education department. Maya, she said, I've been following the story about your family in the news. I want you to know that the scholarship offer still stands, and now I understand even more clearly why you deserve it. Dr. Nguyen, Maya said, my family may have to leave town because people know our story now. Maya,